Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. You know what I've been thinking about lately? Juggling. Not the hobby kind, though if you can juggle like flaming torches, more power to you, but the professional kind, the kind that we do every day as communicators. I mean, think about it. We're constantly keeping multiple priorities in the air: client expectations, audience sensitivities, brand positioning, crisis management, stakeholder relations. List goes on. And just when you think you've got a good rhythm going, someone tosses you another responsibility. Maybe it's a social platform you need to understand. Maybe it's a cultural shift that changes how your audience thinks about your industry. Maybe it's a regulatory change that affects how you can even talk about your products. We're not just juggling our own professional demands. We're often placed at, or we charge straight into, societal inflection points too. So suddenly people are looking to us for advice on what positions to take, when to take them, when to speak up versus when to stay quiet. We become the arbiters of organizational voice during moments of social change. And how did we get there? We're just communications people, right? But then AI shows up, and now it's like we're juggling knives on fire while riding a unicycle on a high wire. I mean, the tools are powerful, but dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. The price and the pace of change is accelerating, and the stakes, both the opportunities and the risks, keep getting higher. Well, my guest today has been perfecting this juggling act for over 2 decades, but with a particular specialty: helping executives and organizations navigate inclusion and social impact communications without losing their footing. As the founder and CEO of Elysee Consulting, she doesn't just help companies say the right things. She helps them figure out how to authentically live their values in a fractured landscape where performative statements can backfire spectacularly. She's navigated this complexity at agencies like Edelman, Real Chemistry, and Weber Shandwick, building inclusion and health equity practices from scratch and serving clients across healthcare, corporate reputation, and social impact. She's been adding elements to her juggling routine intentionally, founding DEI programs, positioning herself at the intersection of communications and strategy and social justice, and most importantly, helping organizations move from good intentions to authentic action. Recently recognized as one of the top 50 of the future of Black America by PocStock, she brings something that's increasingly rare in our profession: the ability to help organizations walk their talk when it comes to 21st century social and societal mandates, especially when the stakes are highest. I want to explore how she's managed this increasingly complex juggling act, what she's learned about operating at these societal inflection points, and how she helps organizations build trust through inclusive communications that actually mean something. So please join me in welcoming my friend, the amazing, the wonderful Abenaa Hayes, founder and CEO of Elysee Consulting. Abby,
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Same
How are
here. I'm good. I'm so glad we made this happen today.
Yeah, me too. And you know, I'm thrilled that I actually was able to pronounce Abenaa right the first time around. But for our listeners here, you know, I've known Abby for a while, and it's always Abby. But you know, you want to search for her on LinkedIn or do something else, and you'll see Abenaa, which is spelled Aben with 2 A's at the end, right?
Yeah.
And that always makes me think, like, to extend that last syllable, Abenaa. But I've been schooled and taught the right way. For some reason, I still can't get Elysee right, but I got it right that time. But Elysee, I keep thinking Champs Elysees, and I want to say Elysee, not Elysee. So I don't know which is correct. But anyway, Abby, it is great to see you.
Same here.
Yeah.
This is going to be
So what
fun.
you been up to? What you been up to? I know it's as of the time it's recording, it's summer. People think things are slow, but they're not slow. There's been a lot going on, certainly in your world. So, so what's going on?
The world has not been slow, because the way the world has been operating means people have to show up and communicate in so many different ways. But ultimately, as you said at the top of this, I mean, if ever there was a time for anyone to truly live and lead through their values, this is it. Because there's been, so much like volatility, so much disruption from a range of perspectives, be it social issues, be it tech, be it just like how people actually engage with brands. it really truly means that you not only need to have the frameworks in place to make sure that you're communicating authentically, but that you also have to make sure that like you're showing up in the right way. Because I think if we've learned anything, because we're having this conversation in August 2025, I would say in the last year or so, the landscape has become so splintered, so fractured, right, with multiple voices. You have to make sure that you show up where you need to show up and actually are being heard by the people that you're looking to reach.
I hear communicators talk about this, and I say the same thing, about showing up in the right way, in the right place. What does showing up mean? Like really, when it comes down to it, you know, I've been accused of being like too metaphorical sometimes by by executives over the course of my career, and more than one CEO has said, "Show up." What? I got to get on a plane. What's going on? Where do I like? What do you mean by showing up? So, like, what is showing up exactly? If you can kind of nail it to a couple of points.
So I would say showing up for me from a company or brand perspective is ensuring you're articulating either a point of view or a position that is not only connected to your business, but to your people. So I'll use an example. We know that there have been multiple executive orders in the universe of DE&I. And so you've seen multiple like changes, approaches, evolution. But if you look at what the Marriott CEO had to say about his business and why it is that they were going to stay true to inclusion, it was because they're a global company. They serve people. People come stay in their properties around the world. That means you're dealing with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different perspectives. So you have to actually be inclusive in order to run that business, right? The CEO of Elf Beauty also framed it through the lens of his customers. He's running a multi-million dollar, probably close to $1 billion beauty brand that reaches a range of customers. He can't not be inclusive because you know what? There's money on the table that he will lose. So, and he's had 20 plus quarters of strong business results. So why walk away from that when you know at the end of the day, this serves your business? So to me, that those are both examples of showing up, right, and standing in your values. Because without doing that, they would have no business, but they also would probably have no people working for them.
Yeah. The one word I would add maybe to the showing up thing is an adverb, and I don't like adverbs very much, but is visibly. You know, so yes, being having the right message, articulating your point of view, but it doesn't make you're not showing up if you just do it into a black hole, right? So you have to be out there, but you have to be out there appropriately. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle is what is appropriately. Like, is it just I post something and then I walk away? Is it I need to keep pounding the drum? And, from what you've written and from what you've said and the times we've talked, I know that the answer is always it depends and it varies. And it's all about what your values are and what your audiences are. And we'll get into that just, I'm sure, as we talk. But one thing occurred to me as you were talking, and I think I asked the same thing to our mutual friend, Alicia Gibson, right? By the way, former guest of the show.
Yeah.
Amazing. Alicia's area is and she calls it cultural communications. And, specifically she's bringing the message of healthcare to underserved communities, right? That need that kind of message in a different way than most people, right? But DE&I for sure. And you mentioned all the executive orders, and we don't do politics on the show, but DE&I, right, has really been poorly branded over the last year or so, right? Maybe even longer than that, depends on who you talk to. But I think there's a DEI brand that's different than what DE&I actually is. And it's interesting you use the word inclusion, because in my mind, inclusion is the most important part of that whole thing for communicators. It's just inclusion. And how far you go with that, and we can have philosophical discussions about what the right, kind of levers to pull are on inclusion. But do you see this as a challenge to you or to people who are like focusing in this particular area? Are you are you trying to separate, maybe unconsciously even, but are you trying to separate inclusion as the force from the rest of it? Or, how are you packaging the whole thing when you talk about what formerly used to be just thrown out there as DEI, DEI, DEI? We don't say that anymore, right? So is there is the focus more on inclusion? And if so, why inclusion over the other things?
So I'd say, DE&I is one of these things that has evolved over time based on, what's been happening environmentally, but also bigger picture, what, businesses actually need. And for me, I personally am less about the acronym and more about what you're actually doing, because when you actually think of what it is so much more than what it's been branded as, right? And I lean into inclusion because at the end of the day, if we know that we are looking to show up as a company, as a brand, as people that support the communities around us, the people who buy our products, you have to literally be inclusive. You can't do anything at the expense of anybody else, right? Different perspectives matter. The experiences of people from different backgrounds, be it cultural, ethnic, and beyond, matter, right? So how do you make sure that you're literally like bringing everybody in and giving people seats at the table and making them see that they're being seen, heard, and valued? To me, that's ultimately what it's about.
Yeah.
And if I just look at the demographics both of the US and globally, like we're truly operating in a multicultural, multi-ethnic world. So if you want to actually make sure you're being forward-looking, you're building, companies that have the right type of talent, you're building products that everybody could use. Ultimately, to me, it's about being inclusive.
Yeah. It's so interesting how different people interpret the breadth of what that means. And I like the way that you phrased it. I really do. I think, I've experienced it from various different leadership teams, what they're expecting or what they're wanting. And certainly the timing is everything as well. Like it was different in 2012 than it was in 2016, than it was in 2018, in 2021, God forbid. And, then here we are now in 2025, which is a completely different world too. So like the way that we interpret and kind of execute on those ideas does change and vary over time. But inclusivity itself, you've been really a force for this. And you said something that actually was also another thing that I've struggled with when asked. And I want to ask the expert here, which is being inclusive, and I'm paraphrasing, being inclusive means, communicating like you can't do anything to the exclusion of anyone.
Right.
So you're defining it by its opposite, right? So like we have to be inclusive. We can't go out there especially as a global company or as an organization with multiple audiences. You need to be inclusive because you can't do anything that's to the exclusion of anyone else. What happens when the inclusive message that you're going for actually ends up excluding someone or some team or some group or some, I don't know, entity or whatever? I mean, how do you reconcile?
So, for me, in all of my different experiences across agency and then also working as a consultant, I try to make sure that there are processes in place to actually avoid that from happening. But one, we're human. Two, we operate in a world where like perceptions, nomenclature, and meaning changes so quickly, right? That there are instances in which people do actually fumble. And I think in those instances where the fumbles happen, that's where you have to just be honest, open, and vulnerable in making the error, in the error and mistake that was made, correcting it, and making sure that you're more purposeful moving forward. I think, I'm sure you've seen this, Dan, all over the interwebs, but there's been all of this conversation about the American Eagle campaign.
The Sydney Sweeney stuff. Yeah.
Sydney Sweeney stuff. And
as of the time of this recording, it sort of petered out a little bit, but
it's petered out
fresh.
a little bit, but it's it's a very important kind of case study in terms of how something that should have stayed in a brainstorm room made it out into the world. That's the first thing. But secondly, even after the fumble and the criticism, the actual apology wasn't really much of an apology,
There was no apology. Yeah.
right? They said it was an apology, but it wasn't really an apology. So, I mean, that is an example of where, we weren't in that room. But someone probably thought that this was all very cute and probably thought, harken back to, the Brooke Shields, now I'm dating myself with those ads.
I hear
Why
you.
don't we do a little throwback and whatever else? And yes, it may ruffle a few feathers, but sometimes that's what brands do. We live in an attention economy, right? So everybody's going for the attention. But the attention at the expense of what? Because, as of today, even though the conversation's petered out, we know stock price is down, right? People are questioning and challenging how marketing actually operates, and is this going to be the way, kind of given the world that we're in? There's so many questions and so much debate, but in my mind, that is a classic example of how not only having the right people in the room is important, but actually asking yourselves those questions before you put it out in the world, right? I distinctly recall an instance with a client of mine a few years ago who had an ad that they thought cute, cool, but they previewed it at a meeting only to find out that it offended several people from the patient population they wanted to reach. So they had to pull it. And this thing made it through all levels of review, but no one actually stopped to call it out because you had people operating from a sea of Satanists.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where I think poking holes, having people who are outside of your bubble and echo chamber review things, because then you can mitigate that. It doesn't protect you entirely,
No.
but it should give you some air cover.
Yeah. Now, if your strategy is to poke the bear, right,
Right.
and to make those be provocative, well, so
Yeah.
be it, right? Then you have to deal with the consequences, but you should be
Right.
ready for that. You should have a
Exactly.
strategy in place. It's interesting because I'm certainly old enough to remember the Brooke Shields ads. I mean, I was a kid, but I remember them.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Calvin Klein stuff that was coming out during the 80s and even into the 90s was very, very risque. And certainly, I get it, the throwback. And there are cultural shifts that
Yeah.
happen all the time. They just, what always amazes me or kind of, and it shouldn't, but it does surprise me, is that the bubble thinking. I think you just talked about is you think that the culture is shifting in your favor, and you know what? Maybe it is if you have a certain value system, but you have to remember that this is a a pluralistic and multi-valued and multicultural society. So if you lean too far in one direction, you will alienate others. So you might take that as par for the course and be cool with it. And that's fine. If that's your value system, all right. And there are ways to do that in acceptable fashion. But somebody's got to have a copywriter or not just a copywriter, but a writer, editor who is relatively fluent in communications to review these kinds of things before they go out. And you can take their advice or leave it. But somebody should have said, when you say the word jeans, there's going to be something happening in people's minds. You can dismiss that, or you can just acknowledge it's going to happen and deal with it, or you can be like, what are they talking about? They're being silly. And I'm sure that it's a mix of all those things, but those all would have been flags to me as a communicator. Be careful. Now, if you're thinking it's time to bring those types of, those types of sex selling ads back, okay, fine. That's the marketing plan. But you don't have to do it in a way that's going to immediately inflame a very solidly large portion of the population. Agree or not, it's just be practical about it. So, and that's where inclusion, I think, what you're talking about has to come into play. And the creators of those campaigns, or of any campaign or any anything that you're doing for external communications, for advertising, they shouldn't look at the inclusion specialist as a cop. They should look at the inclusion specialist as somebody who's like bringing to the table the possibilities and the advice of, hey, look, this is the reality. This is what's going to happen. This is how this is what you might not achieve what you want to achieve. Here's how you can achieve what you want to achieve, right? And then you bring the value. But I'm treading in your territory a little bit there. I just think it's such a fascinating cultural study that we're looking at right now, right? But let's bring it back. We're talking about inclusion. We're talking about your focus on inclusion and impact. And I kind of want to know a little bit about how you got there. I know you have a fascinating family history, and a personal history as well. But why did you lean into this particular part of communications? Why communications and not something else? Free floor. Answer you can answer however you like. But how'd you get here?
So the way I got here was really interesting. So I'll answer the communications piece first. So first of all, I come from a culture of storytelling. So I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and if you meet any person from Trinidad, and you could probably argue other islands, we talk about things in stories. So I kind of grew up with that kind of in my DNA, if you will. And then I actually wanted to be a journalist. So my first career ambition in life was to be like an international correspondent. I loved Christiana Amanpour. Like I saw all of her reporting from the war zones in Yugoslavia. And somehow I was like, I want to be her. Because I think she was actually one of the first women actually hired as a correspondent by the network. And so I went to journalism school, went to USC, did the full-on resume tape and everything, and was like, this is going to be it. And then there was a recession at that time, and I was like, coming out of grad school, needing to pay down those student loans and make sure I had a job, pivoted very quickly into communications. And the selling point at the time was, since I'd come out of journalism school, I knew news when I saw it. They were like, you'd be perfect to do media relations and also help with writing. And I fell into healthcare because not only did I find the sector interesting at the time, but my late father was actually a doctor. Oh. And when he passed away, my mother actually, as her own side hustle, took over managing a healthcare nonprofit that my dad had created that was providing discounted healthcare to people with kidney disease. And during like all the healthcare observances, my mother would write brochure copy for people about like why World Kidney Day was important, why you need to look after your kidneys. We had this whole thing called Neph News, because the nephrons in your kidneys are the things that filter everything in your body, called Neph News Goes to School, and we created all this animation for it. So I'd be like handing out brochures and stuff. So, and I just kind of did it because it's what my mom did. Right? Well, fast forward to this agency gig, suddenly I'm actually doing the work, and I saw my mom. I was like, oh, funny how this all came together. And I think I was lucky at the time that I got to work on 2 medicines that were breakthrough medicines in the treatment of HIV because it was interesting science. Obviously, there were a lot of social issues tied to it. So there was a lot of patient advocacy work that was done with the LGBTQ plus community. So I got to like take really complicated ideas, tell meaningful stories, and talk about the impact on humans. And I really loved that because it allowed me to bring the journalism skills to bear. It made me feel like I was actually making a difference in people's lives because these medications were. And it was like an interesting way of leaning into a toolbox and also like a lived experience that I never thought of, right? I suddenly was like doing the stuff I just thought my mom did just as giving back. So that's kind of how I fell into it in a way.
It just felt right. It was like putting on a pair of shoes, like a nice, that fit well, don't want to put on bad shoes, but it's amazing. That's funny. You make me think about, this whole storytelling thing, and we've talked about this on the show many times, the art and science of storytelling, and, how when we as communicators and marketers talk about telling stories, it's often not heard in the same way that it's
Yeah.
kind of like saying inclusion, like your audience, meaning your leadership team or your clients, they hear the word story and they think fairy tale, or they think like, oh, you're just mucking around and
Right.
creating shit from thin air. But really it's the storytelling, the idea of being able to build narratives that connect with people, that persuade people, that have an arc,
Yeah.
that makes sense, or all that stuff. That's hard work, and it takes a lot of time. But people who have that in their family history, I'd love to do a study one day, because I think there's a lot of that in our especially in our profession. Like I think about, I wonder how many people we can ask that will answer a question in this way. What's your connection to storytelling? Well, in my case, and this is truly my case, I spent so much time with my grandmother when I
Yeah.
was a kid in Bayonne, New Jersey. My grandmother owned a knitting store, right? She sold wool, knitting wool, and she was always like, she was in her 70s or something when I'm remembering all this, but I don't remember any customers ever in that store. I just remember her and her gaggle of all these crones or old lady. That's what it seemed like to me. Just this, what you would imagine. I think a group of 6 or 7, senior citizen women in house coats, house dresses with curlers in their hair, sitting around a counter, and they would talk about whatever. But the place was called Ann Nessel Yarns, and it wasn't until much later that I learned that a yarn is a story. And she would just sit there in that store and just hold court. She was the prime storyteller. She told all sorts of stories about family and about gossip and all this kind of stuff. And the cast of characters that walk in and out of that place. Someday I'm going to have to do a memoir, because it was unbelievable. And the place was filthy. It was a yarn store. She was like 70 something years old. I don't think she swept the floor. I would crawl around there as a 4-year-old kid, and my mom would come because it was only a block or two away from my house. Mom would go, just have to come and sweep my knees, smack my knees off. What's all that dirt? But yeah, anyway, so that story, storytelling started there. She was a fine storyteller. My dad was a great storyteller, and they weren't comms or PR people, but it makes sense that it comes from family in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
But another thing that you were talking about, that switch from your journalism direction to comms, not uncommon, right?
Yep.
I think people look back on that now, people who have gone to the dark side, as they say, and work in PR, right?
I know.
I wonder how many people are looking back on that and going, phew, I made the right choice. Or how many people are looking back and saying, I should have stayed with that because they need me. Because journalism is a weird place right now, right? I mean, the state of journalism, the state of media. Now you are, you're one of the smartest people I know about this particular topic, about media, about journalism, and, not just for healthcare, but just in general. So how are you seeing the state of media these days? And looking forward, how do you think, we as communicators should be looking at media and media relations?
So, I think, and it's funny because I'm in a total group chat with my book club where we've been talking about this topic, but through the lens of what's happened with PBS and everything else. But it kind of brought up the broader topic, which is we know we're operating in a totally fractured environment. And there's this phrase that was coined by the founders of Axios, where they refer to the media environment or the shards of glass environment, right? And this is a trend we've been seeing happen over time, right? Everything's become splintered. People are operating in different echo chambers. They're going to different platforms and different spaces to get information. So you no longer operate in a way where stuff starts with legacy media, gets amplified on social and then gets pulled through somewhere else, like a website or whatever.
Nope.
Like people are, it's like almost like very like audience and kind of like destination focused. So that then tells me that obviously people need to truly go to their audiences where they are, right? And kind of connect with them where they're getting that information. But the other piece to it is, which goes back to your point, Dan, about like the people who come over to the dark sites. It used to be like a terrible thing, like, oh my gosh, why on God's green earth did you do that? Like when I did it, the reaction from my professor at USC at the time was like, please don't go back to the real thing. However, when you look at it through today's lens and how everyone shows up, everyone here is telling a story in some which way, shape, or form, right? And like brands, be it corporate brands, people with their personal brands, are telling their stories, and people are going to platforms to see and hear what people are saying, right? So you actually need people who are former journalists to help you with those chops, right? Like, I mean, I remember when I was at Edelman for a time, they were creating an offering called collaborative journalism, which is where they were working with people who were former journalists to create stories on behalf of brands, right?
That got a lot of flack at the time.
It did get a lot of flack.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Oh my gosh. Like talk
it
about
got-
like trampling on ethics. Like
But you know what's interesting is it got a lot of flack then, but you're actually seeing people show up that way now, right? You
Oh, yeah.
see like companies have their own newsrooms that they build out.
I think our friend Spencer Ante was like part of that whole thing, and he's
Yeah.
a perfect example. Like great
Yeah.
journalist, did great work at Edelman. Like I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, if you look at, like, I know a lot of people look at Patagonia for a whole host of reasons, but if you look at their newsroom, they truly have leaned into storytelling in so many different ways. And a lot of the pharma companies I've worked with have done the same. And the data now actually show that people are going to those websites, and they're also going to the other place that we all talk about, LinkedIn, to see what people are doing and saying. So you actually need people who are a master storyteller. So I'm convinced that if you were to talk to some former journalists who have worked at agency, and probably some of them are actually consulting now, they'll tell you that there's been value in coming over to this side. I think
Yeah.
it's taken a while to kind of build up the credibility, if you will, of journalists leading a lot of the storytelling on behalf of brands, but I think more now than ever, it's needed, and it's extremely important.
Well, the trust studies, like Edelman's Trust Barometer, what Gallup's polls, all this kind of stuff will back you on this, right? That, the consumer trust and audience trust has shifted away from media, and certainly, I wouldn't say that brands are super, super trusted, but they're more trusted than they were 20 years ago, and certainly, usually more trusted in many cases than media. It depends on which media, but they are. So, I think the net effect of having more journalists in PR has been an overall boon to the clients of those PR companies. And it's also fascinating how some of these concepts are like they're 20 years old and they're like coming around again. I don't know if it was I don't know who originally was talking about this, but it might have been David Meerman Scott in the New Rules of Marketing PR back in 2002, maybe.
We're going back in time.
Oh yeah, I mean it was a seminal book for me because that's the book that introduced me to. I was a copywriter at the time, or I had just started my own business as a copywriter, and editing, and I liked writing and editing, blah blah blah, and I enjoyed technology. But that book kind of pulled things together with a sort of glue that I didn't know existed before, and I'm like, oh wait a second, I'm doing content marketing, aren't I? Or that suggestion to a company to talk about that trending topic and try to get some coverage. That's called newsjacking. Oh, interesting, right? That's what he said. And there's some debate about who coined that term, but I'll say David Meerman Scott did. Anyway, this whole idea of the corporate newsroom started to really take hold. Then that's more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Then 10 years ago, when I was at Edelman, and I can't believe it's already been 10 years, but 10 years ago when I was at Edelman, that was a big thing. The newsroom that Edelman was building for certain clients. And that's where I met Spencer, and really just incredible work was being done. And treating your brand, treating itself as a publisher rather than as a clearinghouse for advertising and information. Like, really important stuff. And now here we are 10 years later, and lo and behold, nobody likes the media, or at least the legacy media, right? I mean,
Right.
you know, there's core groups of people who love it, which automatically guarantees that there are core groups of people that hate it. So,
yeah.
so it's going to be very difficult to square that circle. Now, you said something again that's like, yes, perfect, 100% ding, ding, ding in my head, which is this whole idea of the fractured environment, shards of glass, and meeting audiences where they are, right? So given that situation, what should media relations people be doing now? And like, how does that whole function within comms work? And given especially the whole fact that, you know, the environment is what it is, trust is what it is. We've seen with Sydney Sweeney that, you know, you got to be careful everything you say. And that's not the first example. It's the latest of many, 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 many. You know, and then you have technology on top of that, right? So we haven't started talking about AI, but we will. What, you know, so given all this, what does media relations do now?
I mean, for me, this is where being super focused and strategic matters, because, I mean, I think the clear signal is media relations is no longer the be-all, end-all in terms of not only driving awareness, but cultivating credibility, right? You've got to take literally like a multi-step approach in order to drive ultimately what I call brand engagement, right? So it may very well, I mean, there's certain stories that are perfectly suited for earned, and those are obviously the ones that have to hit a really high bar in terms of something that's game changing, making a shift, truly addressing a gap. But then you've got to look at like the other places that your people are and identify ways to reach them. So it may be that you end up pitching a few journalists who have their own Substacks, for example.
Yeah.
It could also be reaching out to people who have podcasts. It also actually could mean leveraging content you might have on a social platform like LinkedIn to try to drive like the attention, right? And it like relationship cultivation with an earned reporter, right? Like the whole days of like have press release, will pitch and get coverage, long gone. It's a very like focused kind of like micro targeted activity. Some of it involves like true earned, but the rest of it means looking at different like platforms and channels to engage with.
Absolutely, 100% on the same page. You know, I wrote a piece a while back, which is pretty popular, called well, popular by my standards anyway, called you know, like media relations is dying and we should let it go. But you know, the point of the piece is that is almost, you know, what you said, but in slightly different words, that we should be looking at earned attention rather than earned media, because it's about, you said it's an attention economy, and you're right.
Yeah.
And what is very obvious to everyone is that audiences are just all over the place. So reaching out to that, you know, to a Substack newsletter owner or a journalist on Substack, as it were, requires the same effort as reaching out to a journalist from any other publication. So why would you assign that effort to the New York Times versus the Substack when you know that the Substacker is reaching the right people?
Right.
When you know that that Substacker is not only more likely to write about you, but will give you the framing and the sort of the context that your audience will need. Now, they may not, you know, they may have something terrible to say about you, but that's probably not going to be the case if you're reaching out to them in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, people always say, well, I don't want to reach out to a journalist because they might say something bad. I'm like, well, if a journalist want to say something bad about you, they would do it. They're not, you know, it's not from you reaching out to them. You know, you reaching out to them is not going to, is at worst going to result in a neutral kind of mention. But anyway, you know, this is the whole thing. Like, where you are apportioning your time and your resources is complicated.
Yeah.
And traditional media relations folks will say, you know, we'll get you in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, with Forbes, whatever. Forbes not really anymore, but like Fortune, whatever, the top tier media, Bloomberg. And CEOs and leaders love that. They eat that up. Yeah, get me in the Wall Street Journal. So it kind of perpetuates itself, which is dangerous. Yeah.
It totally perpetuates itself. I mean, I still am like, I mean, we always used to say, have the running joke, like, you always had the client who wanted to be on Oprah, right? Now, today, it's just like a different platform. But, you know, with all of the layoffs and buyouts happening and all of that, like, the $64,000 question is, one, can you actually get your foot in the door with something? And two, is it actually going to be worthwhile, right?
Yeah,
and that kind of like spotlight play isn't always necessarily the thing that you want.
Yeah. The effort and expense to get there is something that people need to really, really consider very, very carefully.
100%.
And, you know, podcasters and Substackers and these big areas of potential for earned. You know, I think it's astounding and outstanding for people to be pursuing these, but the results are different. Like, you're not going to see well, let me I have to rephrase that in my mind, because I was about to say something that is probably wrong, but a comms leader, you know, within a corporate environment, within an organization, or on an agency team, you know, there was a time when you'd present your results, your quarterly updates, whatever, to the client or to your internal leadership team, and you'd say, look, we got like 6 billion impressions from this story. It went, you know, it was posted to, you know, it's posted to Bloomberg, and it got picked up, and it got here, and, you know, 300 billion, the population of Earth saw this. Like, you're seeing these numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to say, well, wait, then why didn't we get a sale? Right? Why didn't we get a sale? Or but did anybody follow up with us? Did it meet? You know, you don't want to ask those questions.
Right.
But now we can ask those questions, and we can be realistic, and we know that those numbers are bullshit, and we can say, you know, yes, it was very important for you to make a comment, you know, in the top tier media on this topic, because it is really core to this company, right? And it's a good thing that they found you, but that's not where your business is coming from, right?
Right.
You know, now with AI, of course, you know, the more you appear in authoritative media, the better it is for your brand in the long term. But I wonder if that is sort of, if it's wishful thinking on the part of media relations folks, that means we need to turn up the dial on media relations again. I don't know. Have you been hearing anything about this, or considering, or have any of your clients come to you with this idea that, wait a second, I hear that AI really likes it when you're in the New York Times more than it does when you're someplace else, so get me in the New York Times. Has that ever happened?
It hasn't happened yet, but it actually came up in conversation this morning with a former mentee of mine, because it was all around like generative search and how do you ensure that you show up like in the LLMs. So while yes, there may be merit in pursuing an earned strategy that then helps you from a generative perspective, again, I mean, for me, it goes back to like, do you actually have the like stuff that's going to get you that earned coverage? Because I mean, like you said, like you could get earned coverage, but it could be neutral or negative. Do you really want that just for the purposes of Claude or ChatGPT? I don't think so. Right. So again, for me, it goes back to like, what is your overall objective vis-a-vis earned? Is legacy media the place for you to go to? And are there other ways that you can get the coverage and visibility that you want and or need, and have it amplified in a way that then shows up in the LLM?
Yeah.
Because there's other ways, there's other roads, if you will, to getting into that.
It's so interesting. And we're early days. I mean, we're really early days with GEO, with generative engine optimization. And people are looking now to PR to say, oh yeah, we need to boost up the media relations, because I got to get into the most authoritative sources. If I'm not in Axios, then I'm not going to get found by AI. Calm down. let's get that water, put it on your hair, get it out. You're not on fire. It's fine. The same practices that you've had for 20 years or 25 years, if you're doing the right thing, for writing great content and telling great stories remain, right? That's the same thing. But clean up your own house first, right? Get your own into shape. And there's so much you can do on the own side. There was a muck rack study just last week, 2 weeks ago.
Last week,
right, with the state, like something about how AI is like what percentage of coverage of mentions or whatever of companies and brands is coming in AI is coming from what source. And, one of the headlines in the report was, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but one of the headlines was like, legacy media or top tier media is really responsible for the majority of AI mentions or something like this. And it was a very charitable reading of the chart that accompanied it because the chart that accompanied it was very, very clear that the largest, and it was a plurality, there's no majority, but there was a plurality coming from, it was earned media is the source of most of AI stuff, right? And however, the biggest chunk of that was on branded business websites, which is not earned for the most part. That's owned. They classified that under earned, like corporate blogs and things like this. So, I'm going to have to go back to the study and muck rack people. If you're listening, I'm sure that we'll have a discussion because I believe I'm going to be I'm talking to some of those folks at some point. But anyway, the point is, right, that I think we're overemphasizing the significance of, charging headfirst into media relations again, when, first of all, we don't know what's going to happen. And second of all, it's clear that corporate content is really important for GEO. And the owned content is kind of right up our alleys. That's the storytelling stuff, right? But AI is shifting everything, man. It is lighting everything on fire. Where is your kind of stance on AI at the moment? And we'll start general, because I have to talk about AI in every episode. It's the trending communicator. It's a trend, and we talk about the future, right? So, so I saw you comments on something recently, actually on LinkedIn about AI literacy, which I think is like critically important. And I think if you're thinking of like the literacy rates in regular normal reading, in the civilized world, your average person, your average American town is probably like something like 78 or 80% literate, which is terrible, by the way. But literacy rates, and you go to like Japan is like 98.9% literate, whatever. So those are literacy rates. AI literacy on that same scale, I think as a civilization, we're at about 2%, maybe 3%. I don't know. So what was your take on AI literacy, and why is that how do you think that's going to play a big role in your business, but also in comms?
So, I think with all the conversations, there have been the hair on fire conversations, there have been the like dramatic paranoid conversations, like after, some of the articles from Anthropic CEO in terms of what AI is going to do to like jobs and how we operate. And from where I sit, we have always, if you just look over the course of time, there's always been something that's been the disruptor, right? Because with change comes disruption. And while there's so much that needs to be done in terms of managing things with like bias and all of the like errors and the terrible things that come out of these LLMs, at the end of the day, it is clearly changing how we operate in so many different ways. Like if you actually like remind people that the things that we use like Alexa and Siri are all AI, you start to realize these things have been in our lives in different ways. And we're now at like an inflection point where either you're going to like put your head in your sand and ignore it, or figure out a way to learn it and understand it and integrate it into how you're operating, right? And if you're really looking to future-proof a career, your competency, and know how to navigate everything that's coming, you have to actually understand how to use it and also be fluent in it. So, because like otherwise you're going to be left behind. Like there's a quote from Anish Raman, who is the Chief Economic Opportunity Officer at LinkedIn, who has basically said that AI is not necessarily going to come for your job. The people who will come, the people who are coming for your job are the people who know AI, and that's going to be like the key differentiator between like people who just have decided to stay as Luddites versus those who actually are going to like become fluent. So to me, it's like going to be like a key game changer. Sure. And like I literally went from not really using it a whole heck of a lot to now using it in a variety of ways. I had this moment where I was working on one project and I had, you know, all of the things. I'm a typical like Gen Xer. Like I could operate in digital and analog. So I was going to do stuff the old analog way. Go read through my notes, go transcribe something. And then I was like, hold on a minute. There are tools that could help me speed this up. So I started integrating it that way in terms of just like outputs for research. And then I started using it to help me like with writing and organize. So I use it in like, I use different platforms for different purposes. And it's just helped me become a lot more efficient. I think the benefit of having been the Gen X person operating on both sides is I do often give it a side eye from often be like, that not exactly right, or is that really the right source? Like, even though, like, you know, you made the point about the fact that, like, people are trying to up their earned coverage so they could get into the LLM. I remember, like, trying to do a media audit using one of the tools, and it gave me all this lovely stuff, and then I started to look at the citations, and it kept repeating the same ones.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, the sourcing is limited. So then I was able to then take it and expand upon it, right?
Yeah.
But you have to be able to know how to do that, right? And to like poke the questions.
You're saying we need to be critical thinkers when we use AI, perchance? I don't know.
Oh yes, we do. I know. I mean, the thing that like fascinates me is the fact that you've probably seen this too on LinkedIn. A lot of people are talking about. You've seen this stuff in the M dash because AI loves the M dash, but you've also seen people saying that like people are using AI to draft comments for their LinkedIn posts. And at the end of the day, humans know how humans write and how humans speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to be critical.
You know, I don't. Just side note here. The M dash is one of my favorite things in the world, and it broke my heart that that it's associated with AI content. And the fact that AI uses the M dash is a reflection on the fact that so many writers for as long as human history has been around have been using M dashes. That's why it uses the M dash. So let's stop saying the M dash is a sign of AI writing. Weird M dashes are, right?
Yes.
That
yes,
and
the
M dash doesn't
ones.
belong there. Where it doesn't belong there. Like, why are you M dashing that? Or you know, you see a piece that has, you know, 14 different instances of M dashing. You know, you need to give it the side eye. But there was a really cool piece, and I should refer you to this I'll send you the link when I can find it. But there was I think it was about from a month or two ago, somebody wrote a piece from the perspective of the M dash, a legal defense of itself.
I love it.
And it was great in defense of the M dash, and it's hysterical and brutal and brilliant. Like, you know, Anne Hanley posted it, but it wasn't her piece. Like, what a great, like, timely thing, because I spend so much of my time with AI content. I create AI generated content or AI assisted content for myself and for my clients. And, you know, one of the first things I do is I have to clean up the damn M dashes because society tells me that an M dash means it's AI, you know, AI generated. And okay, in this case, yes, it is AI created and generated, but the M dash is a side part of that. That's not the thing. And what a pain in the neck. Anyway, I'm a big fan of the M dash.
But then what does that tell you, Dan? The technology is trying to sound human because ultimately it's about humans, right? So that then reinforces to me why one, there's value in terms of what the technology brings to us in terms of doing our work. But at the end of the day, what we need to deliver needs to be human.
10,000% on the same page. There's, you know, that's a conversation that keeps happening, right? What we need to deliver has to be human. And if you don't, I mean, it's your own fault.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about the calculator, when that first came into existence in the whatever it was, 1930s, 40s, 50s, I don't know. And people started doing math using calculators. You know, if you put yourself in, I don't know, in some particular scenario in that time and place, and you know, you're working, your accountant comes with your taxes and says, I've done the taxes 50% or 85% faster than my competitor, and here they are. And you're like, this is great. How'd you do it? I used a calculator. Would you hand the taxes back to that person? Say, oh, nope, sorry. No, not real. Use your hands. Use pencil and eraser, just like everybody else. You wouldn't do it. Why?
No.
So why? What's the big like? I get it. You know, you don't. AI has a. It's very tempting for users of AI to misrepresent themselves and to you know to make themselves into something better than they are from a public, and that's deceptive. And I think you know we're always going to have to deal with that. But you know, for us, especially us Gen Xers, it is just a boon. It's a godsend. And, you know, I don't have any problems using AI to generate content because I'm on it. You know, it's my lens. It's my work. So, you know, maybe it's the fact that we look at it with a side eye. That's just like you said. I think it's an important factor. You know, you trust but verify, or verify and then trust and then verify again. But there's no question it's disruptive. But it's interesting that we're all, you know, really figuring out how to make use of it. There was something about this ongoing perception, and I want to kind of think about this for comms. And you mentioned it about AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who can use AI is going to take your job. You know, I mean, that vastly oversimplifies the case. My contention, and this is where I want to hear what you have to say. My contention is that none of this is going to take your job, because your job itself is going to be so much different that if you lose your job, it's kind of on you. Like, you have a chance here to build out an incredible job, doing the things that you want to do and that you can do. And, you know, there's two sides of this. You're going to figure out ways to either use AI and enhance everything that you do and do better with your deliverables, and maybe figure out new things to do. And that's great. And you're going to grow and you're going to expand, or you're going to try those things and your employer might say, stay in your box. Dude, you're a comms person. Stop trying to do data analysis. You don't know what that's about. Stop suggesting insights. We got a team for that, you know? So there's these two different forces that are happening at once. So, you know, where do you see the future of the job? Like, what does the future comms person look like from your perspective, especially with AI? And is there an actual description for that job?
You know, that's a really important question, because I feel like I don't know if there's a blanket description for the job. And I think this actually came up in one of our mixing board meetings as well.
I think so, yeah.
Because I think some of the jobs are going to be tailored to the business. And I think the requirements of the comms person are going to be truly tethered to what the business is about, what those priorities are, and then what the competencies are, right? So if I think back to my healthcare career, right? I don't think when I started out that I thought that I would have to actually understand data and statistics. But you have to. Because if you're telling the stories of clinical trial results, you have to actually know about Kaplan-Meier curves, you have to know about like p-values, what significance means, what the implications of those data points in terms of someone's like outlook, prognosis, all of these things. So you had to be like in it to tell the stories, right? You had to become a subject matter expert. Now, I did have PhD people on my teams, but the expectation was I knew it. Same goes for when you were coming up with comm strategies. Like, one of the things at my last agency that was kind of ingrained in everyone was they were data analytics first. We all had to understand it. Yes, there was a whole department, but you had to be able to take what the team gave you and apply the insights in a relevant way.
Yeah.
So that tells me that for as much as some people think comms experts are very broad generalists, they actually are subject matter experts in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it depends on the sector that you're in and the areas of focus. And yes, there are ways things like AI could help us do our jobs in an easier way. But at the end of the day, I think the future of comms really is on people being like sector savvy, being able to leverage tools of technology to help them like with efficiency, but also ultimately also serve as like I keep saying they're like the lighthouses and the sentinels of all organizations. So you
Yeah.
have to be in it, you have to understand it, you have to be that like beam that kind of like sees everything, hears everything, synthesizes it all, and also like sees around the corners.
It's such a big job, and I know, yeah, sometimes I think we're in our own heads a little bit much with this because we think that of ourselves, but oftentimes our corporate leadership teams or whatever don't necessarily share our opinion or
Yeah.
high opinions of ourselves, and that that's endemic through our field, and it's partly on us to show that that's who we are in a
Yeah.
non-threatening way, by the way, but it's also partly on us to sort of push back a little bit and say, no, you have to give us a little bit more room here. You know, I mean, we are like back to what you said earlier. We're storytellers. To do it to tell a good story, you need to know the cast and characters. You need to know the
Yeah.
arcs. You need to know the details. You need to know what the scenery looks like, and you know everything. You need to know the plot. I mean, if we were just expected to come in and just make something sound pretty, or offer some sort of theoretical opinion about whether something's offensive or not, we might as well just be writing run Jane run,
Right.
see spot run,
Yeah.
you know Jack fall down, whatever. That's like, what level of skill do you need? That's one side of it. The other thing that occurred to me is like, if we with AI, it's tempting for sure to go and do a lot of research and suddenly feel
Yeah.
like, okay, I have a lot in my hands now and I can speak, to a relatively decent degree about this particular topic, with very little preparation, but you haven't learned it. You haven't
Right.
learned that topic. In our worlds, as a comms person and a marketer, even like, you spend so much time, like, next to the business people and to the experts who really know this stuff. You go and you interview and you story mine, and then you do your own research on the side, and then you're like, you ask those PhDs that are all around you whether you're right about this or you're wrong about this. Help me understand this. And you can do all of those things with an LLM, by the way, but you're not going to necessarily get the same quality of answers, and you're certainly not get the
Right.
nuance. So, when comms people of the future are, asked to comment on something, I worry that you're going to have people who are just going to be like, just a sec, and they're going to check your chat GPT and say, oh yeah, well, okay, here's what I think, right? And it's not going to take long to see through the bullshit of that, and that there's no depth. But we need to keep that depth as a core, I think, requirement to grow in our profession. That to me is a big, like, how are we going to do that? I don't know if you have any ideas about how we're going to do that. I'm all open to them. But
I mean,
it's a good question.
I mean, that is something that I think is like a key concern for like the industry writ large, because if you weren't kind of coached and trained the way we were, then you can lose that very
Yeah.
easily. And I mean, to me, if that becomes the trend, I think you'll start to see it's only when the like mistakes and the backfires happen will people realize that you actually need to be a lot more purposeful, you need to be a lot smarter, and you got to do your own research.
Yeah.
And I guess some people are just going to learn their mistakes as they go along.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of it, that's where I'm like absolutely convinced it's like people like you and I still have value and merit in the business
Oh,
because
I sure hope
we've
so.
grown up and come up in it with a totally different lens, right? And the only way the next generation is going to learn is if they have like a line of sight in terms of the competencies that like we came up with. Because yeah, it's only going to get the world is going to get trickier, and it's going to become easier to rely on these tools. So you got to figure out a way to make sure, like you said, like the bullshit detector
Yeah.
is like totally clear, stable, and working.
people need to learn how to answer the question why all the time. Like why?
Right.
Because that's what people are going to ask you as you
Right.
get more and more senior in your career, or you proceed along a path. Your ability to answer the question why, and then thereafter how, will determine your success or failure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you have to go running to, if your knowledge is not deep enough, you're going to be exposed very, very fast, because all it takes is 2 more whys and you're done.
Right.
So I don't know. It's I'll get off the soapbox. I can't believe we've been talking for a long time. So
I know.
We got to bring this home. And there was so much more I wanted to ask you about. I mean, we're in the mixing board together, and we run in certain circles, and we know same people. But we'll put that for another time. I think that if anybody is going to ask anyone about the way that we should consider inclusion and impact in this world today, or certainly as a comms professional, and then like what those, what the broader implications of of what's happening around us in society and technology. If anybody's going to ask anyone around about that, they would do the best job that they could possibly do would be to reach out to Abby Hayes. I mean, you really have a very solid understanding of everything that's going on around us, and your history and your awards and your client base and everything kind of are proof in the proofs in the pudding, as they say. That said, do you have anything we haven't talked about, any kind of last words of wisdom that you want to impart to our audience?
For your listeners. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's something that you just started talking about that I think is like really important, and is one of the reasons that like I continue to do this work, and one of the reasons I think I've been successful, which is one, having a sense of curiosity, which I think then is why people need to start asking like questions around like why, because like the why can get you to so many different places, right? The why helps you figure out what people's objectives are, what their needs are. The why helps you figure out what your strategy is, but the why also helps you figure out like what matters to the people that you're trying to reach. And so I think that's like something that people need to focus on and continue to cultivate, because it will take you places that you may not realize, but it will also actually help save and protect you from any potential like issue or crisis that could come your way.
Curiosity.
It's
my brand.
all about the curiosity.
Relentless curiosity, unearthly curiosity. Just keep digging in, man. Just like
Keep digging.
Read a lot. Don't just rely on the little keyboard here. Get your brain food. Go touch grass, but be curious.
Totally be curious.
That's my mantra. Well, on that note, everybody out there, if you want to find Abby, again, it's Abenaa Hayes on LinkedIn. And her name will be spelled properly in the episode title. But you can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her at Elysee Consulting .co, not .com.
.co.
And you could find her on Instagram at Elysee Consulting, Elysee Consulting, one word. And any place else that I missed? Was that the most of it?
I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah, we're always on LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn is the place to be. And if you're in comms, if you are a communicator, and many of you probably are, but join the mixing board, please. Like, go reach out to look up mixing board. It's a great investment for your career and for your network, and for your friendships and for just your knowledge. So check out mixing board. Because there's a lot of choices for professional organizations out there. I'm not being paid to say this at all. Although I should probably reach out to somebody afterwards. But anyway, like, go to mixing board, and you'll run into me and Abby at those events in New York for sure. Beyond that, Abby, this has been a long-awaited pleasure, but a pleasure, nonetheless. But it has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so glad you came on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This was such a great chat. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're gonna come back anytime.